You know those moments? The ones where your kid is having a meltdown in the cereal aisle,
Oh, yeah.
or you've just been summoned for a, let's say, discussion about that glitter incident at school.
Mm-hmm. The glitter incident.
Oh, classic.
Or maybe you're knee-deep in a sibling squabble that sounds suspiciously like, I don't know, miniature wrestling meets interpretive dance.
Definitely been there.
Your primary goal in that exact instant, pure, unadulterated survival. Just getting through it.
Yeah, it's the reality of parenting for so many of us, isn't it? We have these dreams of raising compassionate, resilient, well-adjusted kids. That's the thrive goal, right?
Right.
But then we often feel completely stuck in just survive mode, just reacting to whatever crisis is blowing up right now.
Exactly. You picture yourself having these calm, meaningful conversations about values and feelings right after you manage to scrub some kind of mystery goo off the wall and find the missing soccer shoe. It really feels like that goal of nurturing their growth is totally separate from the chaos of daily life. And that's precisely where the sources we're diving into today offer such a, well, a really different perspective. We're digging into the introduction and the first chapter of The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel and Payne Bryson.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the really essential insights from these first sections because, they immediately challenge that feeling we just talked about, that separation between surviving and thriving.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating is how they frame it. They propose that these difficult, challenging moments, the ones that feel like pure survival, are actually, and this is their phrase, opportunities, even gifts.
Gifts, wow, okay.
Yeah, they're the crucial moments where we can help our children move beyond just surviving the challenge to actually thrive because of it. It's a powerful shift in thinking.
So the most impactful parenting happens during the difficulties, not just in the calm moments between the storms.
Exactly. That's the core idea right at the start.
So this isn't about finding extra time you don't have, which is good news. It's about seeing the fight over who gets the blue cup, or the homework frustration, or the unexpected tears. Seeing those not just as problems to fix, but as actual chances to build crucial skills.
Precisely. Think about that sibling fighting example they use in the book. The typical reaction, and let's be honest, the one many of us default to when we're in survival mode,
Totally.
is just separating the kids.
Yeah.
Stop the noise, stop the hitting.
That's effective damage control. Gets the job done short term.
It is, for the immediate situation, yeah.
Yeah.
But the book suggests that if you understand a bit about the child's brain, you can transform that moment. Instead of just separating them, you can use that conflict as a teaching opportunity.
How so?
Well, you can guide them to practice things like reflective listening, trying to understand the other kid's perspective, learn clearer communication, maybe even compromise, negotiation, forgiveness.
Wow, those are big skills.
They are complex skills, and that's how you turn a survive this argument moment into a thrive in relationships lesson.
So the goal isn't just getting them to stop fighting now, but using all these interactions, the easy ones and the stressful ones, to help kids become, responsible, caring, capable people down the line.
Yes. And the core solution the book offers for doing this is, well, it's understanding some fundamental principles about the young brain that you're helping to shape.
Right, that makes sense.
They introduce this idea of a whole brain perspective. And the central concept, the thing everything kind of hinges on, is integration.
Integration, okay.
And the book maps out that future chapters will explore different facets of this integration, like how the left and right sides of the brain need to work together.
Logic and emotion.
Exactly. And how the upstairs thinking brain connects with the downstairs more reactive brain, how memory works, how our sense of self connects with understanding other people. It's all about connection.
And they also seem to highlight the practical side right away. They mention sections like what you can do for actual strategies.
Very practical.
Whole brain kids, to help you explain these ideas to your child in simple terms and integrating ourselves, which I think is key, reminding parents that our own brain state really impacts our child's.
That's a huge piece. Our own integration matters.
Plus, they mention the appendices, the ages and stages chart, and a refrigerator sheet summary. It sounds like they really get the parents are busy and need quick, actionable info.
They absolutely do. And the promise really is that understanding how the brain develops allows you to be a more intentional parent. You can respond more effectively to the tough situations.
Instead of just reacting.
Exactly. And build a solid foundation for your child's emotional health, ultimately leading to not just surviving parenthood, but, your kids and your whole family truly thriving. It shifts the focus from just managing behavior to actually building the brain structures that support well-being.
Okay, this brings us right into chapter 1 there, which is titled Parenting with the Brain in Mind. And it kicks off with this really insightful observation. As parents, we often become experts on our kids' physical health, right? We know what that cough sounds like, how to tell if a fever is serious, how to bandage a knee.
Totally. We track height, weight, allergies.
But we often know surprisingly little about their brain.
It is surprising, isn't it? Especially when you stop and think that the brain is the command center for, well, everything. Discipline, decision-making, self-awareness, how they form relationships, how they learn in school.
It's fundamental to who a child is and who they become.
Absolutely.
And the crucial premise here, the really big one, is that the brain isn't static. It's not fixed. It's profoundly shaped by experience.
Right. This isn't just a nice idea. It's like core neuroscience.
So the way we parent, the environment we create, the interactions we have, these aren't just influencing behavior on the surface. They are literally changing the physical structure and the wiring of our child's brain.
Wow. When you put it like that.
Knowing this gives us incredible power, really, to nurture a stronger, more resilient child.
Exactly. And the book circles back to that whole brain perspective as the lens for this. It's the key, they argue, to understanding kids better, responding in ways that promote health, and building their social, emotional, and mental well-being.
Which brings us to the Eo woo-woo story.
Mm-hmm.
That's the example they use in chapter 1 about Marco, his babysitter Sophia, in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really powerful illustration of this whole idea in practice.
Yes, it really is. So Marco is 2 years old. He's in the car with his babysitter, Sophia.
Okay.
Sophia has a seizure, she loses consciousness, and the car crashes. Sophia gets taken away in an ambulance, which Marco, being 2, calls the woo-woo.
Oh, wow. Scary stuff.
Very scary. He's physically okay, but clearly shaken up, and he keeps repeating, Ia woo-woo. Ia for Sophia, woo-woo for the ambulance.
And the common reaction, probably well-meaning in that situation, might be to try and distract him, right? Like, let's go get ice cream, or just avoid the topic altogether because it seems too upsetting for a toddler.
Right, because you don't want to upset him more. But that leaves all those scary emotions and confusing events just kind of locked away, unprocessed.
So what did Marco's mother do?
Well, Mariana, his mother, had a basic understanding of how the brain works. So instead of distracting, she did something that sounds kind of counterintuitive. She helped him retell the story over and over.
She encouraged him to talk about it. At 2.
Yeah, she validated his experience first, saying things like, yes, Sophia had a seizure and started shaking and the car crashed, didn't it? Acknowledging his reality.
Okay.
And then she helped him connect it to facts, simple facts. The woo-woo came and took Sophia to the doctor, and now she's all better, giving it context and resolution.
So why was that so effective? What was actually happening in his brain when she did that?
She was helping him process that frightening experience. For a 2-year-old, an event like that is likely dominated by overwhelming right brain stuff. Intense emotions, sensation, fear, confusion, the scary shaking, the loud siren.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all feeling, not much logic yet.
Exactly. By helping him retell it, even simply, adding language and sequence, she was helping him connect those intense right brain experiences with the developing parts of his brain that handle logic, narrative, and understanding, basically, his left brain.
Ah, she was helping his brain connect the dots.
Yeah.
Making links between the feeling part and the thinking part.
Precisely. Integration. If she hadn't helped him process and connect those pieces, those intense fears could have remained isolated, maybe bubbling up later as anxieties, phobias like a fear of cars or being separated from her, or maybe even frequent unexplained tantrums.
Because his emotional right brain will be sort of stuck on overdrive.
Yeah, raging out of control, as the book puts it, without the factual context and the narrative organization that the left brain helps provide.
Okay, so the core concept really illustrated by Marco's story, and the foundation of this whole book is this idea of integration.
Yes, and they define integration explicitly. It's the process of linking different parts of the brain together so they work well as a coordinated whole.
Like how different organs in your body need to work together.
Exactly like that. Your lungs breathe, your heart pumps, your stomach digests. They all have distinct jobs, right? But for your body to be healthy and function well, they need to be integrated, working together smoothly.
Okay, so the brain's the same. It has all these distinct parts with specialized functions you mentioned, left for logic language, right? For emotion on verbals.
And the downstairs brain for basic functions and instincts, the upstairs brain for complex thought and decision-making. Lots of parts.
And integration helps these diverse parts communicate and collaborate effectively, like a team.
A well-functioning team. The opposite, then, is disintegration. That's when the connections break down, leading to that feeling we talked about earlier, feeling overwhelmed, confused, chaotic.
Right.
The book suggests that many challenging behaviors we see in kids, tantrums, meltdowns, sudden aggression, or withdrawal, are often signs of temporary disintegration. Parts of their developing brain just aren't communicating effectively in that moment.
And they mention specific types, like horizontal, left, right, and vertical, upstairs, downstairs, noting these will be explored later in the book.
Yeah, which highlights that integration isn't just one thing, it's a multifaceted process. And the incredible news, really one of the most significant insights from modern neuroscience that the book emphasizes, is brain plasticity.
This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, hopeful. The idea that the brain isn't a finished product at birth, it's moldable.
Yes, it physically changes, it rewires itself throughout our entire lives, but especially in childhood, based on our experiences.
So how does that work exactly?
Well, the science behind it is relatively simple at its core. When we have an experience, big or small, positive or negative neurons, which are our brain cells, fire. They become active.
Okay.
And critically, neurons that fire together wire together. It's a famous saying in neuroscience. The more often certain neurons fire together in response to similar experiences, the stronger the connections between them become. This creates new neural pathways, literally rewiring the brain over time.
So we're not just stuck with the brain wiring we started with. We're not destined to have the same emotional responses or struggles forever.
Not at all. The brain is constantly being shaped. And for kids, this is happening at warp speed. The experiences you provide as a parent or caregiver are profoundly influencing how their brain is wiring itself. It's directly impacting the degree of integration they achieve.
So genes play a role, obviously.
Genes provide the basic blueprint, maybe some temperamental tendencies, sure. But experience is like the architect and the builder, constructing the actual structure on top of that blueprint.
Okay, so give me some examples. How does this play out day to day?
Well, the book gives examples like parents talking with kids about their experiences helps wire the brain for better access to memories and creating coherent narratives.
Okay, makes sense.
Parents talking with kids about their feelings helps wire the connections needed for emotional intelligence.
Right. Naming feelings, understanding them.
Exactly. Or gently encouraging a shy child to interact in a low-stakes situation can help wire connections that, over time, reduce that behavioral inhibition.
So every interaction, potentially, is shaping the brain.
Yes, it's an opportunity to build connections. And they contrast how different experiences wire the brain differently, too. Think about hours of screen time versus learning a musical instrument.
Totally different activities.
Or engaging in sports, or navigating complex face-to-face social interactions. They are all building different neural pathways, creating different kinds of connections, and influencing the child's overall integration in different ways.
And this process of neurons wiring together, that is essentially how integration happens, creating those strong functional connections between different brain regions.
That's the mechanism. It's about creating those pathways, those integrative fibers that allow the different parts to work together harmoniously. They use a choir analogy.
Ah, yes, the choir.
The individual singers are like different parts of the brain. When they work together, communicating and coordinating, they create beautiful harmony. That harmony is integration.
And the benefits of achieving this harmony, this integration, are huge. The book lists them. Improved decision-making.
Better control over their body and emotions.
A fuller understanding of themselves.
Stronger relationships.
Success in navigating the world, including school. It all seems to come back to helping those distinct brain parts work together smoothly.
It does, like Marco, right? Helping him integrate that traumatic experience allowed him to return to being a normally developing 2-year-old instead of getting stuck in the fear and distress of that moment.
So how can we tell, maybe in the moment, when a child's brain might not be integrated, when things aren't harmonious? The book gives us this brilliant framework using the concepts of chaos and rigidity.
Yes, this is where Dr. Siegel introduces his definition of mental health, describing it as living in a river of well-being.
The slow state. Sounds nice. Peace, flexibility, understanding, stability.
Exactly. Imagine that river is the optimal state of integration. You're floating along peacefully. You have clear self-understanding, you're adapting well to challenges, feeling relatively stable and at peace, having a good relationship with yourself and the world around you.
Okay, I'm picturing it. But the river has banks.
Yes, and the banks represent the states of disintegration, One bank is chaos.
Chaos.
This is feeling out of control, like being tossed around in tumultuous rapids. It's confusion, turmoil, emotional storms, basically. A lack of control over your thoughts, feelings, or actions.
Okay, that sounds familiar from parenting. And the other bank?
The other bank is rigidity. This is imposing too much control. It's being unwilling to adapt, compromise, or see another perspective, getting stuck, being inflexible, unable to move or negotiate. Think my way or the highway.
So too little control is chaos, too much control is rigidity.
Exactly. And we, and especially our children with their developing brains, are constantly moving within this river. Sometimes we're flowing peacefully in the middle, sometimes we bump up against a bank, or even get stuck on one for a while.
And chaos and rigidity are the signs that integration isn't happening well in that moment.
They're the telltale signs. The further onto a bank you or your child are, the further you are from mental and emotional health, and therefore from integration in that moment.
This framework seems incredibly useful for understanding common kid behaviors. Like you think about the toddler who insists on wearing a heavy winter coat on a sweltering summer day
Total rigidity.
and then completely melts down into tears and screaming when you gently suggest maybe a p-shirt.
Full-blown chaos.
Right. Or the older child who gets completely stuck on a homework problem, refusing help, and rigidly insisting, I can't do it, I just can't.
Rigidity again.
Which then escalates into tearing up the paper and crying hysterically.
Chaos. They're zigzagging between the banks, right?
Exactly. They bounce from one to the other.
And the book points out that virtually all those survival moments, we dread the tantrums, the defiance, the meltdowns, the arguments, can be understood through this lens. They result from a temporary lack of integration.
Because the child's brain is still very much under construction.
Very much so. Integration isn't fully developed until the mid-20s, remember. So these moments of disintegration are normal, expected parts of development.
But the good news, as the authors really strongly emphasize, is that we as parents have a profound influence on the degree to which our children achieve and maintain integration through the experiences we provide every single day.
Yes. Seeing the chaos or rigidity in a moment isn't just about labeling bad behavior. It's like taking the temperature of their integration level right then.
So if they're in the flow, integrated, they're more flexible, adaptive, stable, understanding themselves and the world around them.
That's the goal. And the strategies the book introduces in the following chapters are all designed as practical ways to help children navigate back into that river of well-being, promoting those crucial integrative connections in their brains.
Okay, that's a fantastic foundation to build on. We've really explored how the everyday challenges of parenting aren't just things to endure, but actually crucial opportunities for nurturing our kids' growth.
Yeah, shifting that perspective is huge.
And we've seen how understanding the basics of the developing brain, specifically the power of integration, how our experiences literally wire the brain through plasticity.
Neurons that fire together, wire together.
And how a lack of integration often shows up as either chaos or rigidity gives us a powerful new lens, a way to understand and respond to our children much more effectively.
Absolutely. By focusing on promoting integration, we're not just managing behavior in the short term. We are actively building the neural foundation for resilience, for emotional intelligence, for healthy relationships, and overall well-being that will serve them throughout their entire lives.
So here's the thought maybe to ponder as you go about your day.
Yeah.
Think back to a recent challenging moment with your child, maybe a power struggle, a big emotion, a moment of frustration. Can you see that moment through this lens of chaos? Or maybe rigidity? How might recognizing it as a sign of temporary disintegration in their developing brain, rather than just, bad behavior, potentially shift your perspective and maybe your approach the next time something similar happens? Something to consider as you navigate the everyday river of well-being with your family.